Yo, hello everybody. Welcome to the stream. Is everything running? Is everything working? Looks like it. Nice. How are you doing? Hope you're doing all right. I'm recording a podcast. I want to do this yesterday, but I couldn't get around to it, so we're doing it today. And I'm gonna talk about the Fediverse and Mastodon, which is something I had on the list for quite a while. I mean, about a year, I guess. Problems with the Fediverse that I'm seeing and stuff. But it's obviously got a lot more urgent all of a sudden because the Twitter thing and everybody going to Mastodon, So I thought I might as well do it now. I might as well slot it in and do it this week. So that's what we're gonna do. I got a new camera. Hope you like the picture. Changed a few things around. My laptop's on the floor, trying to compile Ceph. I have no idea why I have Ceph on this laptop, but apparently I have. And apparently I need a new version. And apparently it takes a year to compile. So thanks for that. Doesn't that belong to Red Hat now? So thanks, Red Hat. Anyway, shall we get into this? Shall we get going? Wait, what's this say? Is this working? Is this somewhat working? Parts of it are working. It's better than nothing. Changed the camera, put lights in brothel mode. Actually, I had the brothel mode for a while. Hello, Astro, how you do? Yes, I bought a LED light, and I thought this was the nicest color. Kind of like it. It's kind of submarine mode or pink, depending how you look at it. Kind of been enjoying that. Hope you're doing well. So let's pitter patter, let's get at her, as Deadly Slop is fond of saying. So we shall do this, shall we not? Hello, this is me testing the things. Let's test the things. That sounds good. Sounds good enough, I guess. The things. Let's test the things. That sounds good. There's some music for Twitch. Sounds good enough. Fucking mute my VOD for music I've licensed. Fuckers. Anyway, I'll get going if it's all the same to you. Let's do this. Let's get this show on the road. Does this work again? This, I think. You're listening to The Private Citizen, defending your right to have something to hide and always asking the next question. This is episode 133 for Wednesday, the 23rd of November, 2022. A blessing and a curse. Hello everybody, my name is Fab. I'm coming to you live from Düsseldorf in Germany. Where it's cold. It's very cold. It's getting extremely cold over here. Winter is not coming. Winter has come all of a sudden. And but that's neither here nor there. Welcome to the show. Hello. Nice to have you back. This episode we're gonna talk. The title doesn't really reflect that, I guess. That's a Monk quote, by the way. That's a good show if you remember that. We're going to talk about the Fediverse, which we're going to talk about because of Mastodon, which we're going to talk about because of Twitter, and the stuff I've discussed in previous episodes about Twitter and all that. And I wanted to do an episode about the Fediverse for, I guess, about a year. I don't know, something like this. I've had it on the list for ages, as a kind of an off-the-grid topic. But also, I specifically want to talk about the issues I see with the Fediverse. And some of which, I think it's a spoiler, I think it's a really good idea, but I think some of the issues for some applications, and sadly, I guess the most popular ones are, I think they're insurmountable, but we'll see. I'm gonna give you my take on that today. And with that, I'm gonna, I said this a lot, but I'm really gonna try to release 2 episodes this week so there's another one coming, hopefully, because I won't be able to record anything in the coming week. I'll be very, 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 extremely, very busy. So that won't happen. So I'm gonna try to do 2 this week, 2 next week. I'm gonna try to do 2 every week, but I'm gonna redouble my. This is turning into like a George R. R. Martin kind of thing. I'm sorry about that. But at least I'm generally releasing an episode a week again. I guess that's, that counts for something, doesn't it? Yeah. So with that, let's get into the show, shall we? Get into the topic at hand. So, I mean, it's kind of obvious why we are talking about this. I talked about this on the show a lot in recent episodes. We had some things happening at Twitter. Elon Musk bought it, and now people kind of think it's gonna die. So that's a thing. That's the thing that is happening. And because of that, people are looking at alternatives. And there's a thing called Hive, I guess, which people are looking at. I had a look. I don't about that particular app. I really don't like that you don't have. That's not on the web. It's just in an app. It posts on public on the web. That's shit, as far as I can tell. But also, a lot of people are discussing Mastodon again, and there've been I don't know, tens of thousands of signups, pretty much doubling, I guess, the users on Mastodon. And with that, of course, Mastodon is prominent, maybe the most prominent service or app or software in what is often called the Fediverse, right? And so now we even have like mainstream media people talking about the Fediverse. So I thought, let's talk about that, right? So our first order of business here will be for me to explain what the Fediverse is, in case people listening to the show, not all of you will be tech geeks. I mean, some will be, because you're probably following me since I did Linux Outlaws back in the day, and so you probably know this or know this better than me. But I'm gonna try to explain this. I'm gonna, as always, try to keep these episodes handy for people who are not into the topic. And, in the first episode, at least, that I do on the topic, I'm going to try to explain what we're talking about. So let's first maybe explain what Mastodon is, because I guess most people will have heard of Mastodon. So, Twitter, I'm guessing. And Mastodon is basically kind of a Twitter clone, right? It has, and that's where we get in the Fediverse thing, it has a lot more to it on the technical side, but from what it does and what it looks like, it's basically there to replace Twitter. It is, of course, also open source, but open sourceness is not really something we're concerned about in this episode, I guess, except pretty much everything in the Fediverse is. So So Mastodon is relatively easy to understand for somebody who is not a tech person. It's basically a Twitter clone. And it works in a way that you can install it for yourself. How it does that, we're going to get into that a little bit later. But so it's part of the Fediverse, right? So what's the Fediverse? It's kind of a loose term, right? Generally, it means, so Fediverse comes from federation, right? What we call the Fediverse is a collection of software that is designed to create, or in many places replace, popular web services like Twitter in a federated manner. And that means, Twitter, Facebook, apps like that, TikTok, Instagram, or even, things like photo sites like Flickr, or blogging sites like Blogger, or LiveJournal. I guess people are using LiveJournal again now. It's crazy times. Are centralized sites, right? There's some company that runs a service that you can sign up to. Now, federation means a situation where we're all using the same service, but we can all be, with different service providers, or we can also, host our own. The thing that is often brought up here, and that's probably the most common example of this, is email. Email is federated, right? You can sign up for Gmail, but you don't have to. You can also run your own mail server, or you can sign up with like a small email company. I use mailbox.org, which is like a German company. Or if you're really crazy, like some people on the forum, then forum.fab.industries. Some people there are running their own mail server. You can do that as well. By the way, while we're at domains, show notes for this episode are at privatecitizen.press as usual. And there's all the contact links in there. So if you want to chime in, if I explain something wrong, please feel free to correct me. And I'm trying, I'm giving my best. I apparently did say wrong things about AI in a recent episode, so we'll be correcting that. Once I get to it, I want to correct things. I'm not an expert in any field. I'm a journalist. I'm just giving my best. I will get things wrong, and unlike many of my colleagues, I try. I know this, and I try to correct mistakes when they happen. Anyway, so email is often referred to when talking about federated services. And Mastodon is kind of like email for Twitter, right? Where you can sign up anywhere at any service. You can run your own or server. You can run your own if you want to, and it's interoperable, right? So you can write people on other servers, kind of like email, right? If I am at Gmail, I can still write somebody who uses Outlook, Microsoft's, and has an email address at outlook.com, or runs their own mail server, because there is a protocol that is interoperable. And the Fediverse kind of tries to do this with like the social web. And there's a protocol that unites most of the Fediverse services, not all of them, but that's called ActivityPub. And somebody who's been around as long as I still remembers this originally as the thing that ran status.net. So back in the day, one of the reasons I'm so jaded on all of these topics is that, of course, I tried federated microblogging, as we called it, back in the day. Years ago, there was a site called Identica, and Identica had this same idea. You could create your own server if you wanted, and I think the software was called Laconica. And then later the protocol, I think it was called status.net, that got turned into pump.io, I think. There was a guy called Evan Prodromou who pioneered a lot of this. I interviewed him back in the day on Linux Outlaws. Me and Dan, we interviewed him. Really nice guy. and had a lot of these ideas, but they never really took off. I mean, they took off in nerd space, but not with everybody's still on Twitter basically. And I think he's since moved on to other things. But we're gonna talk about that. That gets us into the problem with federated services. But first, but this protocol got developed further and is now ActivityPub, and that ties it all together. And it's relatively complicated, but basically what it does, it abstracts what Twitter does on a level for the encompassing the whole web, right? You can send messages to somebody. You can just publish messages. You can reply to messages. You can edit messages. You can delete messages. And it's a protocol for sending these around several federated servers. So it kind of does, a service like Twitter internally will also be federated, right? There's probably hundreds, maybe thousands of servers that run Twitter, where you and me, if we're talking to each other on Twitter, we might actually not use the same server, right? Internally, there's probably like duplication, and there's different databases, and there's ways of these servers to interact, and ActivityPub and the Fediverse and Mastodon basically does this whole expands that out, right? Whereas with Twitter, all these servers are within one company. They are now spread all over the web. So ActivityPub is kind of like this message protocol that enables people to have accounts and to send out messages and to receive messages. And it's kind of, because it comes out of Identica, it kind of was originally designed to replace what Twitter does, but has since then been extended into being like a protocol that does everything on the social web, right? So you can use it to publish photos or whatever. You can use it basically the same way you'd use RSS, right, to publish content. But it has, of course, a lot more features, like commenting, creating threads. There are things like message inboxes, and it's all very complicated. It actually does my head in. It's too complicated for me. I looked at it actually a while ago. I was thinking about implementing it for my website, and it's just massively complicated. There are other protocols that are used in the Fediverse, I think. So between Identica and Mastodon, there was a thing called Diaspora, which was the thing where back in the day, a few years ago, everybody's like, let's get off Twitter. There are always these, let's get off Twitter things. Twitter has technical issues or gets bought by somebody or something happens, and people are like, let's get off Twitter. And Diaspora was one of these things before actually I think Mastodon was around, and that has its own protocol, and that work. I think the idea about the Fediverse, of course, is because it's all open source and all community oriented. A lot of these software solutions interact, and they interact with different protocols, or they have plugins where we can basically interact with different protocols, right? It's not like closed systems like a service like Twitter would be. But I think generally, I think ActivityPub is where the Fediverse is going. That seems to be the protocol everybody is standardizing on. So how does this work? Let's take the idea of Mastodon, right? So I'm Fabsh at Twitter. So I go to Twitter, I sign up, I get an account, and now I'm a user on Twitter, and I can post, right? And if I want to talk to, I don't know, my friend Halifa, she's actually, that's a weird example because she's not at Halifa, she's like at _Halifa_. But if I want to talk to Jonathan at JonathanMH.com, is he _com on Twitter? God, I'm gonna get this wrong. I'm gonna have to look this up now. What's Jonathan's username? Oh God, this is not giving me. Oh, he's JonathanMH_com, right? So I write to him. I just need to do the @ right? If you want to write me, you just do @fabsh, because it's on Twitter. Now on Mastodon, it extends this like kind of syntax to a domain name, right? So I'm currently, Jonathan actually runs a Mastodon server, so I'm using that at the moment. So I'm @fabsh on there, but I'm @fabsh at streamers.social, which is, streamers.social is the service. So that's a Mastodon instance. It's not actually a server because this could run on several servers. It's what they call an instance. It's like an instance of Twitter, right? And so the idea is kind of like with email, everybody, you can run your own Mastodon server, and you can be @Joe at joeswebsite.com. Now that makes the software, or the implementation, as you can maybe think, a bit more complicated than Twitter, because now, so I run my own server. If I mention somebody on another server, the protocol kind of needs to tell that server that I mentioned, like send that content over there. And it also has other more complicated, like it makes things more complicated in other ways. Let's say I'm on Twitter, I want to follow somebody, I go to, my friend Dan from Linux Outlaws, who's @MethodDan, right? I go to twitter.com/MethodDan, and there's a follow button, and I can click follow, and I can follow him. Now on Mastodon, of course, if he's on my server, it's kind of the same thing, right? So Halifa is @Halifa on streamers.social, so I can just go to her page and click follow. But if I am following somebody on another server, I have to kind of copy and paste their profile, or the @user@server.com into my server, my instance in the search bar, and then it even though the user is actually, the server doesn't know about this user, maybe, it's just on another instance my instance has never heard about, it just goes and quickly, discovers that instance, discovers that server, and shows me his profile page within my instance, and then I can follow them. And from now on, my instance has subscribed to their instance, and when that user does something like post or like or whatever, like my instance gets informed of that. And that works remarkably well. It has some issues, which we're going to talk about when I'm going to talk about the issues. But it generally works really well. I mean, for the fact that this is such a complicated system, I mean, it's not that surprising because email works as well, and it's kind of the same. You just need an interoperable protocol, and you need to, build in some, contingencies, right? So you need to, on Twitter, they don't have to deal with, hey, our server really doesn't know that user, or that user's maybe gone, or that server is responding slowly. Like, you have to build in something like this with protocols like this. But, they've been developing it for a while, and it works really well. Before I get into the issues with this, let's talk about why this is a good idea and why we want this. And we do want it. It's generally a good idea, because Twitter is a single point of failure. It might get bought by Elon Musk, who then fires all the people, and then the service burned down, and then it's gone. There might be a technical issue, right? They might delete their database. There might be all kinds of things. A meteor strike might happen, right? Who knows? Lots of things could happen, and then we put all our eggs in one basket, and Twitter's gone, and then we're fucked. All our content's gone. Now, the Fediverse gives us, on this front, it gives us two main arguments, two upsides, like two good things. First of all, if I'm really paranoid and I don't care about, I don't care about some work and I want to set up my own server, I can do that. And then I'm in control of my own data, right? So nobody can just like delete my account. Which, I mean, that's generally a good idea. So that's a definite upside, I feel. Sorry, I'm gonna have to take a quick. I just noticed that this camera is flipped and it's fucking. It's driving me insane. So I'm just gonna have to quickly fix that. That's better. Sorry for that. Anyway, let's pretend that didn't happen and just keep on going. Is that actually, why did I put a marker there? I need a cue point. Don't want a marker there. So yeah, I can run, I can have control over my own data, but that is an upside I can have. I don't need that. The upside that is maybe more applicable for normal people is that, I can also just sign up to a service, and then if I don't like them anymore, I can leave and I can move from one Mastodon instance to another. And there are ways of doing that. There are ways of like exporting, taking your posts with you and all of that. So that's pretty cool. And it generally gives you more flexibility, like easier ways of backing up your data anyway. So that's something we want, right? Just for resiliency, these are really good features, right? To control our data and to just be able to move from one service provider to another should a service provider suffer an issue, or when they go away, we can still go to another instance and we're still on the network. So that is very cool. It is in itself, it's easier to get your data out. Jonathan, who I mentioned earlier, is also in chat. I'm live streaming this on Twitch, as I often do with these shows, for some live feedback, and Jonathan providing some. It's very GDPR compliant, although to me that is not so much an argument, because Twitter is also GDPR compliant. Pretty much any social network has to be, if they want to operate in the EU. Now, I don't think TikTok is, as far as I don't know how they get it. That's actually an episode. That's something I got on my list as well to talk about. But, generally you'll have that. And, you can get your data out of Twitter. But the thing is, the actual thing is not the GDPR compliance. The actual thing is what you do with that data if you get it out of Twitter, because there's only Twitter. Now, a theoretical, a somewhat good feature of Mastodon, and the whole, I'm explaining this in the context of Mastodon because that's what most people know, but this is something that these are all like general Fediverse ideas, right? And they will apply to other Fediverse services as well. A feature of this whole idea is, of course, also something that's close to my heart, which is, the ability to avoid censorship. I've often talked about Twitter, how they have in the past banned people or punished them by taking their verification badge away. Verification is another point. Maybe I get into, but and Twitter has censored people, certainly, and they've shadow banned people, and they've kicked people off the platform, and you can't really do that in the Fediverse, right? So you can, if Jonathan kicks me off streamers.social, I can still have my own Mastodon instance, which I had one for a while. I stopped running it because I wasn't running it myself. I was buying hosting. But I was, I was renting a pre-configured turnkey Mastodon server instance, and just connected together with my own URL. but after a while, I just didn't see the point. It wasn't. I wasn't getting enough value out of it. But we can talk about that a bit later. It's so it gives you that ability. I'm gonna have to when I talk about the issues in a bit, I'm gonna talk about why this in practice is not as good as I'd wish it to be. But of course, it's more censorship defeating than just being on Twitter or any other social network where a company, one instance is in control. It's a pretty cool feature of the Fediverse, right? So that's why generally we want to have that. Also, there's the idea of competition, right? Twitter develops the features that they're a company. They decide what they want to do with the Fediverse. If you have a service like Mastodon with lots of people running it, there's lots of people are interested in this. It's open source. It's an open development environment. People can get their ideas into the code base probably. So that's something that has value. It's kind of like a collaboratively developed product. It's not like Twitter where they're like, oh, we need to make money. We're going to put ads in the stream, right, that you can't get around. That's not something that will happen with Mastodon or like a Fediverse app, because it's an open protocol, and you could always design a client that just, if they decided to put ads in or whatever, any feature you don't like, you could always design a client or use a client that just doesn't show those ads or whatever. Which, by the way, is why Twitter went and basically a few years ago, and it used to be that anybody could just write a Twitter app, and they just got rid of that ability for people because they were getting into putting ads in the stream, and they were afraid that developers would not show these ads to users, and then people would use the Twitter client without the ads. So you won't have that on a Fediverse app. So that's pretty cool. And generally, just like federated protocols are cool, right? They are good. If you're a nerd, and you probably are if you listen to this, we want that. That's a technique that has technical upsides. That are just that. It's kind of like having open source code. From a technologist perspective, it's always better. It's something you want. And here of course you have open source code and you have open protocols, you have interoperability. It creates a better and fairer marketplace for everybody. Although, Fediverse certainly isn't a marketplace because you can't really monetize it. The only people that are currently monetizing it are people that are hosting services for you. Kind of like hosting companies, but it's what we want on the web. That's what the web originally was supposed to be, and it's kind of like a little bit taking the web back from all those corporations that are kind of from the year 2000 and onwards, or even before, but that's kind of when it kicked off, the bubble and all of that. A lot of the web now is corporate and run by companies, and the Fediverse, kind of like the indie web, which I've talked about earlier on the show as well, in some episodes, especially when we're talking about off the grid and stuff like that. It's a movement to get the web back in the hands of you and me, right? The private citizens of the world. Not companies, not governments. And I think that's a laudable idea. And so basically that is the Fediverse. If you want to, I thought about going into in this episode, although I did talk a little bit about that last time on the episode about Twitter. I thought about getting into a little bit what I think about the whole Twitter situation and why I think Twitter isn't going away. But that would kind of distract from this topic. It is helpful because I'm now going to talk about the issues. We just talked about the blessings of the Fediverse. Now I'm going to talk about the curse. And that's tied in with Twitter because of course Mastodon is in direct competition with Twitter. Twitter dying would be amazing for the Fediverse and for Mastodon, but I don't think it is. If you want to know more about that, I wrote a special issue of my newsletter, thesleepyfox.substack.com, but there's also a link, Private Citizen Press, there's a link in the show notes. If you want to know more about that and why jaded old man Fab thinks Twitter isn't going anywhere, you can read that. And with that, let's talk about. We talked about the blessing. Let's talk about the curse then now. So I think inherently, the Fediverse is a good idea. It's something I want, and this is why I went to Identica back in the day. And why I believed in this kind of thing. And I'm not very jaded because it didn't take off back then. It's something you always have to keep in mind when I'm talking about these things. That I've seen this all before, basically. But the problem, there's really only one problem with the Fediverse. And it's its greatest strength. Is also its greatest weakness. This idea to have federated services is a great idea in theory, also in practice. But it's a very nerd idea. It's kind of like, I used to do a Linux podcast, Linux Outlaws. And one of the reasons why I stopped doing it is after 7 years, I got to this point, I was really, for years, I believe, and I still believe, in the idea that Linux inherently is a better operating system than Windows. And it would be better for everybody if they just use Linux. And when I was young and naive, I thought that was enough. That a product being better would eventually lead to dominance in the market, would lead to people adopting it. And what I did not understand, and we're talking about desktop Linux. I'm well aware that in the server space, Linux, even when we did Linux Outlaws, Linux had already won there. And now it's even, Microsoft uses Linux to run half of its fucking cloud by now, I think. So, I'm talking about, this is all of this. I'm talking from an end user perspective, not a customer, a consumer perspective. So I'm talking desktop Linux. And I completely underestimated for a long time, all these other market forces, right? So, for example, something being open source is really cool. If you're a nerd and you're like, open source software is inherently better software. There's shitty open source software, but there's a lot of shitty proprietary software as well. I still very much believe that open source software is inherently better software. But what I've learned, especially being a journalist, trying to write for people, for more normal people in air quotes, the everyday people, is that, for example, that software is open source doesn't really, as an end user, doesn't impact you, immediately doesn't impact you at all. Yes, it might be in the long run more secure and better, but you don't know. It doesn't do anything. Sometimes, you get it for free, and that's you don't have to pay money. But as you get older, when I was younger, that was a big factor for me. But as I got older, it's a typical thing. When you're young, you don't have money and you have time. And then you get older, you get a job, you get money, but you don't have time anymore, right? So now paying for software to me just is a non-issue because I have that money. The time I save by just getting something that's, more pre-configured or more tailored to my tastes, I'm happy to pay quite a lot of money for that because the time is just more important to me. And so when you're coming from that perspective, something being open source on the face of it, especially if you're just a normal person, you don't know what open source really is. You don't even notice, like you don't care really. It doesn't do anything. And the same applies, I think, to federation. As an end user, all the upsides of federation tend to be downsides. And we don't even have to talk about the Fediverse. It's the same for email, right? People are just so used to the headache that, having to choose a mail provider, right? Which back in the day was an actual headache. Then Google came along, you just get Gmail for free and Bob's your uncle. But now if you do that, then, all your information is in Google's hands, and you're basically paying with your information. So that's a downside to people, right? Centralization of something like Twitter is actually a feature to people, because if I say I'm at Fabsh on Twitter, everybody knows how that works. They know where to go. They know how to find me. They don't have to deal with different instances or weird URLs or whatever. They know there's only one @Fabsh. There's only one account with that name. Whereas, on Mastodon, anybody can register @Fabsh on their instance, or on any instance where I haven't registered it. So, names are duplicate by default. So this centralization, like until something fails and until Twitter really goes tits up or does something that people really don't like, this putting all your eggs in one basket, this centralization is actually a valuable feature for people using the service. And this is something that, geeks don't really get, or they don't want to get. It's kind of like, I remember having had this conversation for years with Linux people and open source people, where I tried to explain to them that for a normal person, I keep saying normal person, you know what I mean, right? I don't want to say your mom, because, my mom's a lot more technical than other people's moms, probably. I don't know. So I'm just going to say a normal person, right? Just your run-of-the-mill 9 to 5, got 2 kids, gotta have worries about their family, doesn't have time to fucking understand technology really deeply, and just wants to use something. For them, stuff like this is confusing. Like they don't even, like, you can explain to them what open source means. Generally, they don't know. You can explain it to them, but they're like, so what? Right? So anybody can edit. So who would want to edit software anyway? I just want to use the software. If you just want to use, don't get me wrong, there are upsides for these people for using open source software. They just don't know about it. And the problem is, if they don't know, it doesn't exist for them, right? This is why desktop Linux hasn't taken off, because this is not a feature people care about. They don't care about it being open source, right? You can go, like, somebody's using Windows, you could go, you should use Linux, and then they say why, and you say it's open source, and you explain what, so they go like, so what? And if you go, look, it looks nicer, you have much better chances of them using Linux. They run into different problems when they want to play AAA games or whatever, but that's literally not a feature for people. Jonathan says, look, it's great, you can pick your distro, indeed not a good thing. Well, it is for us, right? We're nerds. To us, this is great, but to a normal person, they're just like, what is a distro? Now I have to choose Ubuntu or Fedora. Now I have to, like, that is just like gets, like, it's not like, we're geeks. It's not that complicated. You can just go on, read a little bit, and but it's like, people don't have that brain. They don't, what I mean by normal people is people who are busy with other things in their life. They don't have the brain space. They don't want to invest the time or, whatever. They come home from work. They just want to crash on the couch and watch like a stupid show on Netflix. Right? They don't want to figure out if they want to use Ubuntu or Fedora. And the Fediverse has the same problem, right? Now somebody's decided that Elon Musk is evil and they want to get off Twitter and they've heard about Mastodon and it sounds like a good idea. And they go like, now what instance am I going to sign up to? That's the first question where most people would go, what? I have to choose. If I use Hive, I just go there, download the app, and I'm done. I'm there. And that's not an unsolvable issue, right? We could go and have like a default instance, right? Mastodon.io or whatever it is. Like this is where normal people from TwitterRefugees.com or whatever, right? We could solve that. But then they're going to have to wrap the brain around how like their username could exist on a different server. And you have to do the add and following. And it's not really that complicated, but it's too complicated when you're used to the other thing. And I think that's why, when you're used to Twitter, you're like, why do I have to deal with this shit now? And that's not unsurmountable, and people can move from Twitter to Mastodon. I'm not saying people can't. I'm just saying when we're thinking at scale, at the amounts of users that Twitter has, and we're talking billions of people, then if you lose, you'll lose people because they're just not technically literate enough. You lose people because they don't care. You'll just lose people. You lose millions and millions of people. Probably even more that people wouldn't even consider. Like they just go Mastodon and then they just hear, oh, there's more than one server, and they're just like, fuck that. I'm gonna go back to Facebook or I'm gonna just stay on Twitter or whatever. Now, if Twitter shut down, of course there would be a lot of people migrating to things like Mastodon. But like generally, that idea is not this whole federation idea, which us nerds who care about the internet and how it works, we think it's a great idea. It is a great idea. It's objectively a great idea. But we value that. But those people don't. For them, that is actually a problem. And you can see, so the reason why email, for example, works and does is because everybody got used to it, right? Because we're talking back in the day, people got the internet and there was like, oh, now you need to have email, right? And this is how you do it. And there was no other way, right? If back in the day, if in 2002, in the year, I don't know, did Gmail exist back then? It didn't, right? But like if really early on Gmail had existed, and that would be like the default thing, then people would have just used Gmail. The thing with email is email got established like before the World Wide Web, I'm pretty sure, right? So basically, when the internet was invented, email was invented. So the geeks got there first. So if the geeks get there first, they can, like, they could, I don't think it's ever going to happen again, establish this kind of federated thing. And then the normals, right, they just have to get used to that. That's how we do things, just swallow it, right? If we'd gotten there first with Linux, then they'd be all used to, like, you have to pick a distribution or whatever. You have to pick a text editor when you start the thing. If we get there first, but we will never get there first again, because now corporations are on the web and they have more power, more money, they can do things quicker, and they'll always get there first, right? If we go Web3 is the future, and this is actually happening, you can see this. Web3 originally being an initiative where people said, okay, the web is too corporate. And it's kind of also like a Fediverse idea, right? The web's too corporate. We have to get back to like individual, however we're going to do this, service or whatever, servers. Was already in the beginning a quite anti-corporate idea, but now the corporations are in there because they're like, oh my God, they're going from Web 2.0 or whatever to Web 3. We have to be there too. So they're all in there. They're all in the, in all the panels and all the discussions. Of course, you can never get them out because, they've made billions and trillions and whatever amount of money on the internet. Then now they know that that's where you can make money. They're not going to they will not let us as the private citizens or the open source community or the Fediverse community or whoever, the nerds, create another internet which they're not in there from the beginning. That will never happen. And even with the internet, of course, there's a reason why, the most used domain is .com, and where that comes from, doesn't come from communication. It comes from commerce. That ship has sailed. And I think that is the huge problem. Now, the question is, right? All right. So we have this, and we recognize that what we want, federalization, what's an upside to us is a downside to other users. This sounds like communist propaganda system. Let's just accept that. Can't we just still build the Fediverse? And people are doing that, right? And there are communities on Mastodon and on Pleroma, I think, which I think also uses ActivityPub, and on the Diaspora, on all these. There's tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people using this. Can't we just let it be like that? Can't it be a niche? Like, isn't that bad? Why is that bad? And I think, that's what it is, and that's what it's going to be, I think, and it's never gonna change from that, I think, because if we're talking about like social services, the centralization is a feature for people, and they will gravitate towards that because it adds value for them that everybody's on the same service, on the same thing. This is why, services rise and fall, because they're the biggest, and then they lose users, and then they migrate somewhere else. And there's always one or two big ones, or maybe three, where most of the people are. And that's, I think, how it's gonna work. I think that's gonna, that's how it's gonna work. But can't we have just like our little nerd niche, right? And it's cool. Like, that's legitimately, for a lot of nerds, this is a feature of the Fediverse, right? It's kind of like Twitter back in the day. When I joined Twitter 14 years ago, none of the fucking celebrities, mainstream news nobody was there. It was all nerds. Like, we migrated from Jaiku because that was complete only nerds. It's like OnlyFans, just only nerds. And we just shared pictures not of our bodies, of naked bodies, but of naked config files, right? Complete nerd town. We moved to Twitter. Twitter was pretty much nerd town in the beginning as well. And there's people who want that back. And you can find that on Mastodon, right? Or on the Fediverse. You can even have your own instance and kind of like, a little bit shut it off as well if you want. And people like that. Nerds like that. And then there's other communities who are like, who see like the Fediverse or Mastodon or their instance as kind of like a safe space. Because they, people who say that will often like kind of say, well, all the trolls are on Twitter, then we don't have the trolls here. I don't believe that. I don't think the trolls are the problem. I believe, and I've said this a lot, that Twitter is just it's just people. Like, when people complain that there's too much hate on Twitter or on the internet, whatever, I think what they're complaining, but they're actually probably for the first time actually confronted with what humanity is, right? Especially in a somewhat semi-anonymous context. That's how people are. If people could be like that to you on the street without the consequences, that's why they do it on the internet, they would be. Like, the problem is not the internet, it's not Twitter, it is people. So, I think when people go to smaller communities and see them as a safe space, what they're actually seeing there is that they're not confronted with the general public. They are within their own community, and it's kind of like when you're hanging out with lots of Star Trek nerds. There won't be any fucking Star Wars nerds in there who go like, hey, but Star Wars is better. This is a stupid example, but it's kind of self-selecting. You're like in your filter bubble. And I mean, I'm not saying that doesn't have value, that can have value. Mars and back again. Hello, by the way, in Twitch chat, asked, do you think Mastodon.social could be the big thing people go to with nerds and sub-communities on other servers? So that was the thing I was referring to, like we'll have just one server, right, where everybody goes. I mean, I think that is where a lot of, like, the people that are gonna migrate, for them, like, however many those are, I think it depends on will Twitter die, right, or whatever. Yeah, I think the Fediverse will gravitate to something like this, where we have big instances where there's more general people and then there's all these little sub-communities, and they might as well, not have that much to do with each other, but that's kind of how Twitter works as well, right? There's sub-communities on Twitter that really don't, like, there's all these, for example, kinky people on Twitter that you'll never see because they post all this not safe for work shit, and Twitter's just not putting that in the algorithm, so people who don't know anybody from that bubble basically will never get in contact with them, and they have no idea there's like all these kinky people, there's like porn stars on Twitter, they'll have no idea, right? So you have that on centralized social services as well. For the reasons I went into, I don't think that many people will gravitate towards any Mastodon instance. Because as long as there is a centralized thing, and I think if Twitter dies today, like 90% of those, like, I wouldn't even, like, I would say 99.9% of users are not going to go to the Fediverse. Right? Those are going to go to I don't know, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, whatever, Hive, the next best app, and some of them are just going to go, oh, fuck this shit, I'm out. And they're just going to live without social media. Because, like, while those niche communities are fine, they work for us nerds, and they work for people who value the old Twitter without the Kanye Wests, Donald Trumps, ABC News, The Guardian, right? When it was just us. People who value that, they are fine with that. But the big majority of people, I mean, let's face it, okay? I've listened to a lot of community conversations about this, like online, right? On Twitter, on Mastodon. I've seen a lot of people discussing this. And people pretend like Twitter or Mastodon is some kind of messenger. If you want to stay in touch with your friends, first of all, Facebook's much better for that. But then, Facebook's only for old people. But like something like WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, anything, any messenger, or generally a messenger app is a much better thing to do that for. Or if you're playing a lot of games or something, or in some kind of community, maybe something like Discord, right? Basically, new style IRC. People are not on Twitter to talk to their friends and family. There is one reason why people are on Twitter. It's reach. Twitter gives you the unparalleled. Twitter enables you to do something that people couldn't do before in the history of the internet, which is you can talk to basically the whole planet, and you have a chance. Like, I can tweet at The Rock, right? And it's a minute chance, but I have a chance that The Rock sees that and replies to me. And that only works because everybody's on Twitter. All celebrities are on Twitter. All the news, everybody's on Twitter. And Twitter is a very unique social network as well, because it's public. It's not a walled garden, right? It's every tweet is a web page that you can read. Even let's leave protected accounts out of that. That was an abomination. Like, it's kind of like DMs. Why Twitter ever implemented shit like this, I will never know. But okay, doesn't make any sense in my opinion. But okay. the unique selling point is it's a web page, it's public. That's why tweets are in TV shows and not Facebook posts, because Facebook's not as discoverable, and journalists don't know if they actually can take if that's public. With Twitter, it's assumed that everything's public, and that has a lot of value. How much value that has, you can see by the fact that Facebook originally was private first and pivoted when Twitter took off. They were like, this is cool, and Facebook pivoted to public by default. They since then they've changed that again. And Twitter also kind of, with protected accounts, and like not everybody can see this tweet or whatever. But like, and Facebook was very that I feel I'm pretty sure, like, this is my opinion, but I think that's one of the reasons why Facebook. Facebook is now the boomer network and everybody fucking hates it, but it's the biggest social network ever, right? And it overtook Twitter, and massively so, and it's much more successful as a company. Basically took away the business of classified ads from everybody else, and it's one of the 10 biggest companies in the world. Twitter by far isn't. So it pivoted and took that. So there's value in that, right? And that's why tweets are in TV shows and in newspapers. That's why they're the basis for most of the news stories in the last like 5 to 10 years. That originate on the internet. That's why all the celebrities are there. That's why all the brands are there. And the value of Twitter is that all these people are there, that you have to be there, and that everybody can possibly hear you. As a normal person, they probably won't, but still, with a relative like small number of followers, you can still tweet your ISP, and they're like, oh God, this guy has 500 followers. This is 500 people that see that we are shit, right? And you can get shit done at Twitter, on Twitter, posting at companies that you'll never get done over telephone or with contacting them directly or whatever, right? If there's a privacy problem at a company, it's probably quicker to kick loose a shitstorm on Twitter than to ask your the privacy officer of your, in Germany we have a federal state as one. It'll probably be more effective to do this on Twitter. Which has downsides, which is where a lot of the cancel culture and, trying to get people thrown out of jobs, and if they do something you don't like comes from. It doesn't only have upsides. But all of this is only there because everybody's on the same service. Everybody knows everybody's on the same service. And that will never happen in the Fediverse. Right? Because, I don't even, you don't even necessarily, you're on some instance, right? You don't necessarily know that The Rock signed up to some other instance. You probably at some point it'll go through the network or whatever, but it's just like, it's not built for that. I'm not saying centralization is a good thing. I think I said this before. And from an architectural standpoint, it certainly isn't. But it concentrates, it makes this, it's like, it makes everything simpler. Like Twitter is a brand, right? It's a thing, it's a service. Whereas Mastodon is just like some amorphous blob, and now I'm on chaos.social and George Takei is at track.social and all this. And it brings there's all these other problems I haven't even talked about, like how do you verify? You can't fucking verify anything on the Fediverse. You could kind of, right? If I'm Coca-Cola, I could have social.coca-cola.com, and then because I control the Coca-Cola domain, people know that, okay, that's the official account, right? Or I on my blog can say, well, I'm on streamers.social, so people know that Fab, that's his blog, he controls that. I can say this on this podcast in my own voice, and that is my account, not some other account some joker has created. But still, people fucking, interestingly, Fediverse proponents made fun of Twitter because when this whole thing happens, when people were like, oh, I'm Nintendo, and it was, Joe Blow in 96, at Joe Blow 96 was like, oh, I'm Nintendo of America. I buy myself a check mark. And they were like, this is outrageous. Elon Musk is an idiot. This destroys all verification, and you can't be sure that anybody is any account anymore. Whereas you can, because you can see it's not at Nintendo posting this. On the Fediverse, that's like anybody can be Nintendo. I can be Nintendo on Streamers.social. There's an amazing Mastodon instance, by the way, called brands.town, which is full of people impersonating brands and posting and shit posting like in actual PR speech. It's hilarious. And there's like made up brands like large VPN and shit like that. It is hilarious, but it shows this very problem. That is also not unsurmountable. But all these problems kind of collect, right? And to Joe Schmo user, they're just like, how does that what? I don't get it. Jonathan says, get a domain is the intended method of the Fediverse. Yes, but exactly. But get a domain excludes 99.999% of all 999 of all users. Nobody fucking knows how to get a domain, right? I mean, I think I'm a nerd, and I know a lot of nerds. I know a lot. So the ratio of the people I know, like the geek ratio among the people I know in my life on the internet and personally, is probably higher than with most other people. And I would say that maybe 2 out of 10 people I know how to get a domain. Maybe 3. And maybe 1 or 2 of them actually got a domain, has a domain. I mean, this doesn't apply if you're a brand. If you're a brand, you already have a domain. But, what I'm trying to say is, if on a service like Twitter, where everybody has a username and you can remember the username and it's obvious that at Nintendo is Nintendo, if people, because somebody changes their icon and their display name, mistake motherfucker47 at motherfucker47, whoever that is, props on the username, on Twitter, for Nintendo, right? If that is already a problem, those people who made that problem will not wrap their brain around having at domain. No way. They won't. That's just like you can give up on that. And yeah, I know you can say, the same thing applies to email, and the same methods that we use for email can apply to this. I'm not saying it's an unsurmountable problem, right? People can just remember that fabs@streamers.social, but people don't, and that's why email phishing exists, and that's why millions of people every day get malware on their computer, because they get an email from somebody, whose display name is their boss's name. The email address is completely different, but they don't notice that. So it's I understand how the Fediverse works. I understand why it works that way, and then I understand that all of this shit is desirable, but it is not very user-friendly. And it's not supposed to be, because the people who come up with this shit are nerds. And in the end, that's why Linux took off on the server, because servers are run by nerds and not on the desktop where people just want to get on with their lives. Right? Because this kind of technology by nerds, for nerds, and it just doesn't work for the general public. And that is not actually comparing those two problems. It's not so much a problem with Linux, because I use Windows right now, but I've got Linux on this machine, and I boot into Linux, and I'm compiling something on my laptop right now. Actually, no, I'm not. A failure occurred in the build. Error. Yeah, so I can't. So I'm actually not compiling, but I can, it's not so much of an issue. If I want to use Linux, I can use Linux. Linux has lost some value, or doesn't have as much value as Windows has in some areas, because it is not mainstream. So AAA games on Linux is hard to impossible. But I can live with that. I can use that for certain applications. I can dual boot, whatever. But the problem is that the only reason Twitter exists is to get reach. It's to become famous, to get a lot of followers, to monetize that. I know there are probably millions of people on Twitter who don't want that and who are happy doing whatever they do, shit posting their little communities. But you have to realize that if you are like that, that is not the reason why Twitter exists. That's not the draw of Twitter. The draw of Twitter is I can spew my opinions in the world, and I can potentially get read by thousands, if not millions, of people. And my tweet could blow up, and suddenly I'm all over the world. And I have as much reach as the New York Times. That's why journalists are on Twitter, right? This is why people who are trying to make a living, this is why artists are on Twitter. And that is the goal. And that reach is only achieved by Twitter being essential, because, I can 5 years ago, I could say to somebody, what are you doing? And I'm like on Twitter. Why? And I could explain to them, well, this, I can talk to the world. What is it again? Twitter. And they go home and they go Twitter. Right? And then they type in Twitter into Google. Oh, a website. Oh, there's a sign up form, and I'll sign up, and bam. And they're on the same Twitter, and they can do the same thing. It doesn't work. If I tell them I'm on Mastodon, they're like, or on the Fediverse, they're like, Fediverse, what's that? And then they don't get a site. And Mastodon, yeah, you get a site, you get a server, and you can sign up, but it's, for all the reasons we discussed, it's not the same thing. Mastodon is not, or the Fediverse in general is not built for reach. It's not built for this. It's not built to be monetized. Otherwise, it would be centralized. It's built as a resilient infrastructure that has nerdy qualities, but that is not optimized to get as many people as quickly as possible on it and make it as easy as possible for those people to use this service. Otherwise, you go like, why even have federation? Like, if you're okay with everything, with being on a company's service, with them owning the data, whatever, then there's no reason for federation, and that is sad in some respects, but it's also the reality. And to me, as as somebody who's, I talked about censorship resistance. That's a definite problem with Twitter and services like that I've talked about a lot, and that I really don't like. But unfortunately, and one of the reasons actually, this is not a Fediverse problem. This is specifically a Mastodon problem, but this explains why federation in itself doesn't save you from this. It makes the situation a lot better, but so one of the reasons I stopped using my Mastodon server is that, a lot of people will not see this as a problem, this specific instance, and I don't think the specific instance of what happened is a problem. But the approach is, so Mastodon uses ActivityPub, right? It uses an open protocol. And there was a situation when people created this network called Gab, which was basically right-wing people that got banned off Twitter were like, okay, we're going to create our own social network. And they used I think they used Mastodon as a base. I don't know, but it was compatible with Mastodon. It used the same protocol, and you could follow, like, if I had a Mastodon instance, I could follow Alex Jones on Gap, right? And then the Mastodon developers decided to hard block in their software connecting over this Fediverse instance to Gap, right? Because they're Nazis, whatever. I think they had a technical reason as well, but let's be honest. You could tell by the discussion that these people did this for idealistic reasons, political reasons, which I understand. I don't want to, I understand. But that completely takes this, like, censorship resistance argument. In that moment, they took that away, right? Because now I'm not beholden to a company, but now I'm beholden to some open source developers who have other values than me, and who change the code. Of course, it's open source and I can fork it and all of that, yes. But to me, that, like, betrayed a key, I know that's not the Fediverse, right? That's just one project, but it's one of the most respected and biggest projects, and a lot of people agreed with that. And I was kind of like, what's the point? What's the point of having a federated open protocol when you do things like that? Right? That's like saying, I don't want any emails like that are delivered over a Russian domain. I mean, you can do that, but, like, if my mail provider did that, I would be gone from that. Like, I would be like, tomorrow I'd go, like, I'll use another service, thank you. And just imagine, this is the WC3 or whoever is in charge of the email protocols and standardization. I don't think anything has changed. Like, okay, we got, like, we got some secure. I think they probably changed. Yeah, there's some changes happening there, but, like, not in, like, the content how emails are delivered, right? That part of the protocol, I think, is pretty much the same as it was in the 90s. I think the last thing they did was, like, add HTML to emails or something. But, like, just imagine, like, that consortium would go, okay, so we don't like the Russians, so our protocol is not going to deliver any emails from any servers that end in .ru. Gmail is fucking with, Jonathan says, Gmail is fucking with email much worse than the main instance canceling Nazis. We still send emails to Gmail. Exactly. Right? And that's a good thing, I think. Because, like, it doesn't make sense to have a federated open protocol and then just, like, impose your political values on it, right? Like seriously. I mean, I know I have a different opinion than some people on this thing, on things like this. But, like, if literally Hitler was alive and Hitler had a fucking Mastodon account, and I would go, I want to follow him. Like, it's not the fucking, like, protocol designer, software designer. Like, what? It's not their place to say, no, you can't. Especially when I'm a journalist and I might follow because I want to report critically on this, right? I certainly didn't follow Alex Jones. I don't think I ever followed him. But, like, I wouldn't follow him because I think what he says is sane. Probably just for amusement reasons, but also, I don't know. If it was my beat, of course, also to report on it. Johnson says Gap forked it. They forked Mastodon. Yeah, but, like, that's not the point. Like, the point is, like, that very decision to me just completely canceled that censorship, because it just moves the problem, right? Now I don't have anybody, like, now I have Elon Musk who decides at Twitter what accounts get deleted. Now I have, like, some open source developers deciding, oh, this guy, I don't know, we don't like people using petrol cars or eating meat or whatever, not gendering people, or I don't know, not using the silly stupid fucking content warning thing on Mastodon, which is bullshit, as far as I'm concerned. It just like, that's, I don't know. And beyond that, Federation has other issues. People moving servers, not migrating, disappearing, turning up again. So I stupidly deleted my account and didn't, when I didn't. I mean, that's not a Federation problem, but like, I deleted my account and now I have to follow everybody again, of course. I mean, that'd be the same if I deleted my Twitter account, of course. But like, it's like, at least if I went back to the Twitter account, probably, and somebody else picked up that name, but like, I would still be at Twitter, right? Now people actually don't know that I'm on the Fediverse because I deleted my instance, and they don't know I'm on the other instance. And if I don't post about it on Twitter or whatever, or on my blog, how they're ever gonna know? Well, I could post on my blog, but like, wasn't there an open source software that destroyed computers in Russia if they used it there as SRC? There probably was. And they've always been like, I remember in Linux Outlaws, we were discussing these things, right? There's always been, especially open source developers who like, there's been these stupid licenses where like, you can't use this to kill people, right? Or as militaries, like software or whatever. Like, you can use this in military applications or whatever. And there's, we had discussions about why that is stupid, and that's really not, it's not open source and certainly not free software. But like, without going into the specifics, to me, that is just dumb. Like, that's not your job. Just, I mean, on a very basic level, that's not your job if you're making software like this. On a more specific level, there's also the problem that these fucking idiots at Mastodon, they make good software, but they have no fucking clue about politics or history or, social sciences, because there were people in that thread who were arguing with other people, like, we're talking developers, right? Arguing with people that these people on Gap were Nazis. Like, I mean, I understand using the term Nazi as a, I know what that means if you use it colloquially, and that's kind of okay. But they're not actually Nazis. Like, not in there's, believe it or not, there's a scientific definition what that means historically. And I'll let you get off if we just have a discussion on Twitter or whatever, or on Mastodon or anywhere else on the Fediverse, or on my blog or on the forum. Or you email me, it doesn't matter if you use that word. But if we're actually discussing the political implications of like software developers using a politically a protocol, which in my opinion should be politically agnostic, and actually taking on the responsibility of trying to decide what is okay, what is politically okay for this protocol to submit. Right? And what instances, other instances should connect to. If they're making this decision based on if somebody's right wing or not, in that context, you should fucking know what the word Nazi means. Right? Because when you're in a discussion about software development and we're talking about how you should implement your fucking software, and I jump in there and I confuse JavaScript with Java, right? These same people won't be fucking happy. So as somebody who studied a little bit of history and politics, I get really, really irate if people trying to decide something like this and they don't get that fucking right. But that's more of a personal pet peeve. But that's where, like, for me, the whole censorship thing, kind of fell apart. It's not like that problem goes away. You're just trading that problem, right? And yeah, I know the Fediverse has more protocols and whatever, and I can fork it and then have my own software. But that problem is still there. What I'm trying to say is that problem doesn't go away. You can always have like somebody. There's always somebody in a position of power with something like this, right? When you're running a centralized social network, then it's the company running it, and here it's developers, and it's more of a meritocracy and whatever, and it's more of a level playing field. But there are still people who are in power of these kind of situations. And one of the things I always never liked when we talked about this on Linux Outlaws, open source people tend to pretend that doesn't exist. They always go like it's a meritocracy and you can fork it and you can do your own thing. But like in reality, you can't, right? In reality, you are Linus Torvalds or you're not. And if you're Linus Torvalds, you have infinitely more power of where the Linux kernel and the whole ecosystem goes than if you're not. And that's just the reality. That's just how it goes. And if you're Red Hat, you have a lot more power than if you're Fab. Even I could be the best programmer in the world. If I'm Red Hat and I'm paying thousands of people to work on Linux, I've got more power. And that's just the way it is. So I think, but this is like, we're veering off, right? I think I've explained why, in my opinion, the Fediverse has the issue that it will never go mainstream, and what that means if you're trying to replace something like Twitter. I think it's a neck breaker, right? I think it's doomed by the way it's set up and the how it came along and when it came along. It's doomed to never take off, which means it still has uses, right? It's still where those communities are and whatever. But it's kind of like your Discord and you're saying, hey, maybe if Twitter goes away, everybody will go to Discord. No, they won't, because Discord does something completely different. And to me, kind of the Fediverse also does something relatively different. Not completely, but it's different enough. The difference is that Discord looks completely different and never said it was kind of the same thing. Mastodon tries to also do this, but Mastodon is a fucking, let's be honest here. Mastodon is a Twitter clone. And the whole ActivityPub protocol only came about because somebody wanted a federated open source version of Twitter. It is basically Twitter. It doesn't mean it can't be used for something else. And it will be, and that it's bad. But it was basically designed to replace Twitter, and it never will, by the way it's designed. And that just means that to a lot of people, it's not interesting. And also, I think I've pretty much said everything on this that I wanted to say. I'm going to close with a personal observation. I think it's a good idea, but I don't really see the use case. Because myself personally, I'm torn between I'm okay with Twitter being centralized. And I think just if Twitter goes away, something else, which I don't think it will anytime soon, something else will come along. I was that sad when Jaiku went away. I still, some days I wake up and I still wish Jaiku was still there. And I migrated to Twitter and I migrated to Google Plus, and I was sad when Google Plus went away. But there's always, it's always a bit sad, but always something new will come along. And to me, like the Fediverse is not that. And the Fediverse does a lot of things which I think I don't need it to either. So I was thinking about, should I implement this for my blog? And so I don't like the whole in the case of my blog, the whole comment aspect wasn't really that important to me. And the other things that the Fediverse basically does, where like you have a blog and you can follow somebody there, right? So your website, your blog, this is more like specialized stuff, but like, you can implement ActivityPub like in WordPress, or I could do it in Hugo as well. So somebody with a Fediverse account, let's say on some Mastodon instance, can follow my blog, and my blog becomes basically in Mastodon. It'll look like a Mastodon account, and it will automatically like toot or whatever they call it these days when I publish something, right? But I was thinking about that like for days. I was like, but we have RSS for that. I know RSS is going away, but I really like RSS. I'm a podcaster, surprise. And they're kind of trying to, like, with that function, why isn't that just using RSS? I mean, I understand it does more, and then you could comment, and you can build in like a conversation. You could put that into your blog. I know it does that, but it kind of, to me, that I don't know. For me, that is not something I want. So in thinking about all of this, I've also been thinking about the indie web, which I talked about. I think talked about that on the episode when I talked about why does my brain not work? What's the software called? Where the basically what web alternative we don't have. Now I have to look this up. We don't have pictures, and you just have links, but they're not inline. What's that space pro? Mercury, Gemini. That's it. Thank you, Astral. Gemini. You are quicker than me looking that up. So the idea of the indie web is kind of overlaps with the idea of the Fediverse. So the idea of the indie web is that we should go back to having our own stuff, right? Hosting our own things. And it's a very nerd thing. I think it's almost even nerdier than, but I'm talking nerd stuff now, right? My blog is nerd stuff. Than the Fediverse, because like this implies that you have to get a domain. And I just explained to Jonathan that just means that 99.999% all users are out. But to me personally, if we're talking nerd stuff and we care about nerd stuff, that is like the idea of the indie web is much more appealing to me, because that's more like host your own things. And, I don't really need I just don't see, if we're using technology that is for us nerds, and that probably nobody except nerds and the people that nerds rope into doing things, like their significant others or whatever, and their parents, if we have technology that only those people will use, like, why don't we just use technology that's built for that? And I feel like the Fediverse isn't. I feel like the Fediverse is built to replace social networks in that context, which never will. So why not just use the indie web where we do this shit? And instead of being on Twitter, and I've actually tried to do this a lot more, it's hard for me because I like things like Twitter. I still have that Gemini site, by the way, AstroC. I haven't posted anything to it because it's just too fucking hard. But I've actually been, and Jonathan, who was here earlier as well in Twitch chat, has ideas about that as well. I'll tell my mom to read my post on Gemini instead. Yes. No photos for you. Yes, Jonathan is also working on this kind of thing. I'm very interested in that. I wanna get Hugo to publish to Gemini, but that's a whole different story. If I ever get that done, I'm gonna do a podcast episode on it. Of course, I'm gonna talk about it here on the show. But like the indie web kind of assumes that it's a nerd thing, right? The people who created Gemini, they never thought this is gonna be for the public. They never thought people would migrate to Gemini from whatever. And that kind of appeals more to me. Like, that's more my thing. So what I really like, for example, instead of ActivityPub, is something called Web Mentions, which Necros has on his blog, producer of the podcast. And it's kind of like instead of where ActivityPub basically implements sending tweets back and forth, and having inboxes, for lack of a better term. Web Mentions just a ping, basically. It just goes, it's kind of like RPC, the web RPC shit that WordPress uses, which once DDoSed my, that's how somebody took the Linux Outlaw site down once in a while, ages ago. So basically, when I it's not. I mean, you can do it when you publish on your blog. You can ping, like if you link to somebody, you can ping them, which is like is it called WebRPC? Is that RPC? Yeah, basically pingbacks. Yeah, that's some live journal. Was that live journal? Well, I can remember pingbacks. So basically that. But it's more. I think where that was targeted as I write a blog post and I link your blog and then I ping your blog, so I link to you. Okay, that's. I'm sorry for that. I couldn't do that off mic. Okay, we're gonna have to. I'm gonna have to cut that out. Oh God. Yeah, so we're basically it's more pingbacks are aimed at that. I think not ActivityPub. Web mentions are more the other way around. So it's more like I write a blog post and you comment on it on something like Mastodon, right? Or on your blog, and then it pings me back with a link. So I can automatically, if I want to, or I can moderate it or whatever, put that under my website and go like, Jonathan commented on this. And then, I guess I can also pull his comment in if I wanted to. Like, if that was, if you tie that in with, there are websites, for example, where you can tie these web mentions in with ActivityPub, right? So if somebody replies to your blog post basically on Mastodon, it goes back on whatever. I'm not sure I've settled on doing it manually for now. I think I'm going to do, I'm actually in the process of rebuilding my website a little bit. I'm just going to do links in there. Like if somebody wants to email me, I'm going to link to a Fediverse account and Twitter and email, and then people can just send me stuff. And then if I think it's cool, it's interesting, I can manually embed it under a blog post. It's work, but like I want high quality comments and probably fewer of it instead of more and just random links and people just spamming shit everywhere. So for me personally, I think that's the way I want to go. But like to me, I just want to say this indie web idea to me is a much more valuable idea, because I understand this. The value in just being among nerds and having your little niche thing. And I'm not saying people should do that with things like Mastodon. I think that's completely valid, right? We do whatever you want. I mean, come on. If you want the software and you want to build whatever you want, do whatever you want. I just wanted to talk about this on the show because I always I feel that a lot of people that are talking about the Fediverse and Mastodon right now, especially with the situation at Twitter, there's this assumption that kind of resonates when they say things that, to me, they're also saying, well, one day this could replace Twitter. And I, for the reasons I mentioned, fundamentally disagree with that. And I just wanted to lay that out there. Yeah, I just wanted to do that, and I just did. And of course, you don't have to agree with me. I assume you won't, actually. So you can send me feedback as well. I mean, if you really want to, you could do that on the Fediverse. I mean, I have an account now. Again, I'm Fabsh on streamers.social, brought to you by jonathanmh.com. So you could do that, but I prefer, if I ever really want that, I'll put that in the contact details on privatecitizen.press, which is where you can go. But please, email me or whatever. The contact details are there, and send me feedback and tell me what you think about this. And then maybe we can have a discussion, and maybe I can have another episode on this and talk about this. speaking of feedback, I have a number of emails I have to mention. I'm not gonna, well, for obvious reasons. So I had a lot of people, quite a few people recently, writing me and telling me basically that they, in so many words, that they didn't have specific feedback about recent episodes, but they just wanted to drop me an email. I think basically to tell me, hey, I'm still listening, right? And I appreciate the show. And I wanted to say that I appreciate that very much. And if you did that, thank you. That's also valuable. I always say that I want feedback from people, but it's completely okay if you just listen to an episode or like every episode. I don't care. But it is nice to have people writing in and telling me, hey, I got some value out of this. Like, if anything, I kind of, this show changes. And if you've been listening to it for a while, you will have noticed. And the reason why I change topics and I change things around is that's how I work. I try to figure out what works and what you like and what brings you value. And because I'm very datensparsam, I'm trying not to collect data on you listening to this. I have very limited statistics on how many people listen, what they listen to. I know that the listenership has generally increased over time, but I don't even really know how many of these people actually listen to the show. And I, that just doesn't give me, what I have doesn't give me an indication of like, this is what people like. Also, I don't trust these numbers because I've been a journalist, and just because, it's because something is downloaded a lot doesn't necessarily mean that people like that or that they actually want more of that. I just noticed that my show notes, I just didn't end a sentence. I'll have to fix that before I release this show. So please, that's valuable to me. Like, it's also valuable if you just ping me and say, hey, that episode I really liked. Like recently, I think, was it Butterbeans did on like a Strava run of mine? That cracked me up. That was great. Anyway, yes. So, but if you have feedback, if you disagree, if you agree, also let me know. Private Citizen or Press details are on there, or you can, if you can find me on the Feli Voice, of course. Right. And with that, let's talk about the other important things here and then get out of the way. I'm looking for the button, and I've now found it. The button that plays this music. So if you think this is valuable, you can, there's many ways how you can become a producer on the show. You can send me feedback, or you can help me out with things. People have done that, if you want to explain to me how I get my Hugo blog to efficiently, automatically serve posts in Gemini, then that is something that's very valuable to me, and you would become a producer. Or you could just, pitch in a little bit of money, which also helps. God knows, pretty much like anybody else, I can use it right now. But I also understand, because of the situation, if you just can't, so it's okay. This is not a pressure situation. Do whatever you want. The show is produced under the value for value model, which is something Adam Curry and John C. Dvorak on the No Agenda show came up with, which is basically, it's free. And if you, want to give something back, you can, but you don't have to. And with that, let's talk about the people who have made this episode possible by pitching in, so to speak. Thank you to Sir Goltaran. I feel like I have to salute Sir Goltaran, Rodane the Insane, Steve Hose, Butterbeans, Michael Small, 1I11G, Jonathan M. Hetai. He's in chat, so I have to pronounce his name correctly. Michael Mullen Jensen. Michael has to, like, at some point he's gotta come on the show again and just help me with that name. Jaroslav Lichtblau. Or if he's American, he could be American, it could be Jaroslav Lichtblau. Dave, Sandman616, Jackie Plage, who I've talked to on the Fediverse today, who has some amazing new tattoos. IKN, Bennett Piata, Rizal, Vlad, Avis, Joe Poser, Dirk Didi, Indie Gamiacs, worth searching out on wherever you look for your podcasts, and on Twitch. Fadi Mansour, Kai Sears, David Potter, Cam, Mika, Mr. Amish, Robert Foster, Captain Eckhead, Crunkle, Ajay Tracy, Rick Bragg, Ricky M, Astro C, Barry Williams, Jonathan, Superuser, D, and Florian Pigosh. And also, thanks to my Twitch subscribers, because as you know, I live stream this on Twitch right now. Well, not right now when you listen to it on the podcast, but yes, those people who subscribe to me on Twitch also help out, because, they pay subscription fees, or Jeff Bezos pays them for them. And I finally, the website I used to figure out who my Twitch subscribers are is working again. So I can tell you again, thanks to Mike the Dane, Jonathan 4747, MTE Sorrow, Galtaran, L Terrestrious Jim, P. Keemer, Bacon the Pork, Mod 7's Unavailable, Redeemer F, and Stupid End User. Got it right this time. Yeah, and that's it for me. Theme song of this show is called Acoustic Roots by Raoul Kabzali. And I have licensed this, as well as the end music that I'm playing, which is licensed through Epidemic Sound, so maybe Twitch can stop muting the fucking recordings, which I then send to YouTube. So if there's shit muted on there, it's Twitch's fault. Thank you, Twitch. I have bought a license. Now go fuck yourself. The song I've licensed for you, I like it. I don't know. People sometimes say they like the end music, and I like to just have something different every time. So this time we have some, I think it's acid jazz. We're going to listen to a song called Hanso by Martin Landström. Martin Landström. Maybe he's Danish, maybe not. Maybe he's going to get mad if I pronounce his name like this, but I kind of feel like he's Martin Landström. Martin Landström with Hanso. Anyway, have a good time. Do whatever you need to do on the Fediverse or elsewhere. Don't let me tell you what to do. Question everything, ask the next question, and always aim to misbehave. I like that fading out in the end. That's pretty cool. Yeah, wave like it's 1995. I was indeed playing a wave because, like, why wouldn't I? Yeah, that's it for me. I'm gonna fix the show notes now. I think I still need a teaser image for this show, and yeah, I'm gonna run away now. Go away now, as the Critical Drinker says. But don't go away, because I'm gonna shut off the stream and get to work. But I'm gonna raid you on to Blubberhoof, who is a streamer, obviously. Somebody I sometimes hang out with in Helifa's chat when Helifa is streaming. So I'm trying to copy and paste that name, because it's Blubberhoof D97. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna raid him or her. I don't know. Can't remember. Who cares? I'm gonna rate them. Let's rate them. And thanks for watching. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. Probably gonna record a show tomorrow, but I don't think I'll do it on Twitch. I might not be able to do that. But yeah, there should be another podcast episode out soon, I hope. And then I'll probably see you in 2 weeks, because next week I won't have time to stream. Don't even have time to play Darktide. It's a shame. Jonathan will be level 80 or whatever the highest level is by the time I jump in again. But anyway, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And see you, if not soon, then hopefully soon enough.